This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Shield, Vice President of Heartland LTC, and welcome to the fifth and final episode of LTC 101, our series of educational webinars on the long-term care insurance marketplace. Today, we are looking at selling LTC in today's marketplace, from contracting to commissions. We'll also be taking a look at how COVID-19 has changed the way we do business and what it means for the future of LTC. Before we get started though, as we've done with each episode, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Heartland LTC. We are now in our 26th year of serving the long-term care industry. We are your one-stop shop for all your long-term care insurance needs. We recently have been focusing on education and making sure both producers and clients have the knowledge they need regarding long-term care planning. After we're done today, we hope you'll reach out to us with questions about clients you work with that could use long-term care, either in the Q&A at the end or after the webinar is over. Today's episode, the fifth and final one in our LTC series, will focus on the new business process and how we're working around the challenges associated with COVID-19. We'll be looking at the following areas, including contracting and licensing, making sure you're all set up to sell long-term care insurance, field underwriting, reviewing your client's health prior to taking an application, application including electronic applications and the initial requirements, what is needed at the time of submission, the personal health interviews or PHI and how COVID-19 has affected that process, parameds and APS reports, the medical requirements for these cases, delivering a policy, what happens on delivery of a policy, how commissions are paid, and finally, my system's a little slow this morning. And finally, how the industry has changed since COVID-19 and what the future holds. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing to know about contracting and licensing is that most states include the health license as part of a life insurance license, but some include it under a separate line that may need to be added. Make sure your own state license has the health line, and if it does, you're good to go. Next is the E&O or errors of omission coverage. Like life insurance, you must carry valid E&O insurance, and when contracting, that certificate needs to be provided to the carriers. Contracting with a carrier is actually fairly straightforward, and in most instances can be done at the time of application. In other words, we don't need to pre-contract you. This means less work ahead of time. So you don't need to actually do anything until you have a potential prospect and a client ready to submit an app. That also helps us because of the amount of carriers that we have. So once you've nailed down the correct solution for your client and identified that carrier you want to use, we do need to complete the contracting at that point in time. They're also known as some states where you need to have them ahead of time. The first is the group is called a pre-appointment state. These states require that you be appointed with a carrier prior to even soliciting business. There are 5 such states that are listed as pre-appointment states. That's Kansas, Louisiana, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Montana. If you're in one of those states or doing business in one of those states, you would need to be pre-appointed with a carrier in those states prior to soliciting business. You can't even send a brochure or do an illustration or anything like that until you've been appointed. The other group is called not just in time. The initial ones are just in time states. This group is called not just in time states. These require you to be appointed before submitting an application, but you can solicit business. You can show a quote, you can do brochures and begin discussing long-term care before being appointed them. There are 6 such states here as well. They are Alabama, Kentucky, Ohio, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. If you are not in any of those 11 states, you're in what's known as a just-in-time state. That's where we do not need to have contracting done until you have an app and you actually do the contracting and submit it at the same time as an application is being submitted. Finally, each state has a continuing education requirement. Some states overlap their requirements, so you only need to satisfy one such state CE. For example, Arizona will work in Nevada, and vice versa. It won't work in California, though. There are states that have their own unique sets of CE, for example, California, which has its own set of rules, meaning you have to take California's CE to do anything in California. As an example, though, the state of Arizona has an 8-hour initial course and then a 4-hour refresher that is taken every 2 years thereafter. If you let your CE lapse and wait 3 years, you still only just need to take a refresher that is fine for the next 2 years from the date that you take it. You only have to take that 8-hour course once. And then after that, there's 2 4-hour courses to choose from, and you have to alternate between the two. So you take one and then you take the other one the next time down the road and then switch back to the other one. So it has you bouncing forth between the two. Next, let's get into some field underwriting questions here. And this is the next part of the process. After you've either been contracted with a pre-appointment or if you don't need to be contracted, your first thing then is field underwriting and working to pre-qualify a client. As a bit of behind the scenes info here, most carriers require that agents maintain a specific placement ratio to ensure they retain the higher compensation levels and to qualify for a production benefit such as trips and conferences that they may offer. The best way to help you ensure that you keep that high placement ratio is to pre-qualify your clients prior to taking an application on them. Pre-qualifying clients can save you some time as well and potentially a case. If you do not pre-qualify, we may discover too late that they may be declined by the carrier's underwriting rules. This can discourage your clients and can cost you a sale because you submitted it to a carrier that was not going to accept it in the first place and wasted their time and your own in processing this. But if you pre-qualify them, you might learn that a specific carrier will take them over another carrier that's going to decline them. You'll also be able to better quote them and determine the potential underwriting class, and thus provide them with some more information and a more accurate premium expectation when it comes to their ultimate premium of the final policy. So what can be used to help us pre-qualify clients? Well, first, their RX history or their prescription history. Knowing what medications they're on is extremely helpful. Also need to know their diagnosed conditions. If we're able to find out, okay, what have they been diagnosed with? This is the reason for the medication, because as you may know, some medications are taken for different things. Knowing what that medication was for is extremely helpful as well. And finally, the current status of their conditions. If they were diagnosed with a condition, but it's cleared up, that'd be great to know as well, because some conditions have a waiting period on them before we can apply. We also can actually eliminate some conditions as being not a concern if it happened 5 years ago, as opposed to happening 1 year ago. It changes the weight of how much that condition is looked at by the underwriting team of a carrier. If you don't like asking the difficult questions, the difficult health questions, all of this information can also be obtained using a fact finder form. Heartland LTC has 2 different fact finder forms to help determine a client's health and their goals regarding long-term care. If you're interested in receiving either of these, be sure to drop me an email at the end of this webinar and I'll be happy to send them over to you. My email will be on the end screen of this presentation, as well as my phone number as well if you just want to call, and I can fax them, email them, however you would like me to get them to you. After you do your information gathering, either through a client meeting or through the fact finder forms, then you can consult the underwriting guides that are published by the carriers to see where their conditions rate. These guides are available for free to you as PDF files for you to view online, or you can print them out to have your own copies to keep with you. such as when you go out into the field, you can have a copy of the thing there with you, or download the PDF to a tablet or even your cell phone, and you can have it there to look up conditions on the fly and see what the carrier would rate them as. The underwriting guides update about once a year as new health risks and assessments are made by actuaries and underwriters. So be sure you're using the latest guides. A side note on that, the guides have not been updated for COVID-19. There are some additional changes that went in because of COVID-19, specifically for those that have come into contact with COVID-19 or that may have contracted COVID-19. There are some different delays that are involved in having those conditions or being near those conditions. We'll discuss those a little later on in today's webinar. Alternatively, if you have a specific situation that you can't find the complete answer to in any of the guides, maybe you've got a person that has multiple conditions that are on their own not knockouts, they aren't automatic declines, but combined together, you think that they may cause a concern with the underwriter. And that is common. If more than one condition is involved, it can stack on top of each other. We call them comorbids. It can cause the underwriters to take a harsher look and possibly move them up or down an underwriting class. A preliminary inquiry is submitted to carriers' underwriters, though, the same group of people who would be reviewing a submitted application, and they will respond with a likely underwriting class. So they will review the medical information that we provide and then come back with a decision. Now, keep in mind, this is preliminary. That's specifically a preliminary informal inquiry. The final decision is made after all medical evidence is reviewed, so they are going to wait until they get medical records before they will do an official decision. But the more information that we provide now, the more accurate this preliminary assessment can be. But the official class is always determined after a review of complete medical records, such as the APSs and the phone or the personal health interview. They will always wait until they have actually gotten the official word before they make a final decision. So even though the preliminary inquiry may come back as a decent review of either preferred or select, if something pops up in the medical records, they reserve the right to change that decision. And in fact, when we submit a pre-qual to these carriers, when we are asking for a pre-qualifying information, we do not submit names, dates of birth, anything specific like that. We will say male age 65 or female age 64 or 48, whatever the generic information is, we submit, but then we submit the specific details of prescriptions, diagnosed conditions, and the status of those conditions, as well as any other information that you may feel pertinent to advise the underwriter of, such as if they've got arthritis but they are very active, they mountain bike every day. That can be very helpful in helping sway the underwriter one way or the other. So how has coronavirus affected underwriting? Well, carriers have taken some steps to help mitigate their potential risk for them regarding claims, and thus have published guidelines that are causing some cases to be postponed. Please contact our office regarding specific situations. If you have a person who may have come in contact with a confirmed case of COVID-19 or someone that had COVID-19 and is now looking to get long-term care insurance, please contact our office and we'll let you know how each carrier is responding and we can figure out which one is the best way to go depending on your specific situation. However, most people are unaffected by these changes, so you can submit business normally. There is no need to hold business or just sit on an app because you're afraid that the carriers are going to look more harshly on cases based on today's conditions going on with the pandemic. That's not the case with most people. Speaking of applications, what is required when we're submitting an application? Well, first, of course, there's the application packet itself. This collection of forms covers the most of the necessary information when applying for long-term care insurance. With some carriers, additional forms may be required when specific situations arise. These are best submitted at the time of application though, but if you aren't sure, the case manager will request them after the fact, after they have reviewed the packet and realized that something else needs to be submitted. This is the case of if we're doing a 1035 exchange in funding the policy in some way, or perhaps there is a health a HIPAA form that is specific to a doctor's office that we know they require their specific individual form. One of the cases of these is Kaiser Permanente in California. They will not accept the generic forms from the carriers. They have to have their own. There's several other medical groups that do the exact same thing. Even here in Arizona, we've got several groups that prefer their own form be used rather than accepting a generic carrier form. When that happens, the form is obtained by the carrier and resubmitted back to you for signatures on the client to get their medical records. So it's not something you have to go searching for. It's not something the client has to go searching for. It's best to let the carrier come back and say, hey, we need this form. Some carriers also require premiums be submitted. This has changed though in recent months. Transamerica still is looking at two months of premium required with their applications. National Guardian Life used to require a minimum $200 with applications, but no longer does so. National Guardian Life will now accept an application with no premium. Mutual of Omaha has gone the complete opposite direction and refused to accept any new premium. When new applications are submitted, no premium can be submitted with an application anymore. They updated their forms the last time around, which removed the carrier or removed the line where the premium was being submitted or the amount of premium was being submitted. That is now always zero. Finally, a producer cover letter. This is entirely optional, but it does help the underwriter understand better about your client. Remember earlier I was talking about arthritis and still having full range of motion or full activity. They were actually getting out there and getting active. That helps the underwriter realize that the arthritis is not that bad. Same thing goes for other cases where you can show that the client is not suffering from their diagnosis. It is more mild in nature. That is very helpful to the underwriter. Of course, those are non-official things. They are still going to look at medical records. They are still going to pull all the RX prescription information and that kind of stuff. So the letter is more just kind of a help guide the underwriter through to tell a story of the history of the client. Again, not required, entirely optional. We do not see many cover letters, but when we do, it does help the underwriter determine what's going on with individual clients. So what about electronic applications or e-apps? These have become a lot more popular in the era of COVID-19. Well, first, every single carrier offers an e-application. Every single one of our LTC carriers has e-app. Mutual of Omaha, Transamerica, NGL, they all have e-application options. These can be done entirely online with your client via email or teleconference, like a Zoom meeting, or even just phone call with them looking at their computer on the web on a web browser. Signatures are entirely electronic. There is nothing that needs to be scanned or faxed, so your client can actually do this from the comfort of their home while sitting at their computer. If they use a web browser and an email, they can complete an electronic application process. This process is extremely streamlined for you. It's specifically designed to help business flow into the carrier easily with the least amount of fuss on your part as well as on the carrier part. By doing an electronic application, all the data is instantly submitted into the Mutual of Omaha system. It skips the step of imaging, which is what happens when a paper application is submitted. Whenever an app that goes into the carrier, they have to image it, scan it, put all the data into their systems first before it can get assigned to a case manager. This process can sometimes take 24 to 48 hours depending on how backed up they are. We usually see them in 24 hours or so is usually the time frame that we see there. But in an e-app, it's usually in immediately because the case is submitted electronically and everything pops up instantly for the case manager. You get assigned a case manager and an underwriter right away. So an e-app is very, very useful as far as getting stuff in quickly. Also, the new business process is shifted toward you. You will receive notifications directly from the carrier regarding updated status. If they need a form, such as the HIPAA forms that we were just talking about, or something was missing, you'll be notified directly by email from the case manager when you do an e-app. We also are notified so that we will help you guide you through and making sure that everything is all still squared away. But you actually have direct access to the case manager when doing e-applications. So now you've submitted your application, be it an e-app or a paper app. What happens next? What should you expect? What do you need to know? What do you need to do? Well, simply put, nothing. Unlike the life insurance, the agent doesn't have to do anything else regarding medical records or parameds. In life side, you're usually having to order paramed records, or you have to get the medical records yourself, have to order the APSs through the different APS firms. You don't have to do any of that with LTC. The carrier will handle most of the necessary requirements from here on out, provided the application is in good order. If it wasn't, we'll be notified by the carrier, as I said, so will you, that something is missing, and we can help you get it submitted to ensure the case is not delayed. Most times, if it's just something simple like an answer was missing from the app, it doesn't delay the case at all. The case will actually continue forward. They will begin ordering medical records. But if something like a signature was missing, like maybe even the signature from the HIPAA form, the health authorization form, that slows the case down completely because we cannot go anywhere until we have that signature in place. But the first thing a carrier is going to do as far as medical requirements go is they're going to consult the Medical Information Bureau, or MIB. This isn't the Men in Black. The MIB checks past records to uncover errors and omissions or misrepresentations that are made on insurance applications. This is kind of similar to a credit report, but for the insurance process. It helps prevent fraud, it helps prevent increased risk, and thus preventing increased cost to the consumer. So if you're thinking about not including something on an application, mainly because it's not important enough to mention at this time. I've actually had someone say those words to me, by the way. Don't. The carriers will know when you haven't included something, and it throws up huge red flags. So be sure you include everything that you can on an application when discussing a client's health history. The carriers will know when you've missed something, only if it's been reported to somebody else, though. They don't keep records on everyone. This isn't the FBI, or you don't have a file somewhere. They only are records when they've applied for insurance before, and those records are kept to indicate what medical histories they've previously disclosed, and that's any type of insurance, not just long-term care insurance. So life insurance, disability, anything that they've applied for that had medical underwriting involved, those are all on file. If they do not mention something that was in there, it's going to throw up a red flag to the carrier. Go, why didn't you mention this? So be sure to disclose. It's better to be disclosing the information than to skip it. The next thing you're going to do is what they call a pharmaceutical check, or an RX screen. Sorry, RX screen. This again is similar to the Medical Information Bureau. It shows a history of prescriptions, which is why it's important to disclose all medications on the app as well. Some drugs are considered automatic knockouts, meaning if you're on them, you're going to automatically be declined coverage. These medications are all mentioned in the carrier underwriting guides that we just discussed. So again, field underwriting helps avoid this problem. So if you can look up the medications that are prescribed now and determine whether or not that is a knockout, we can eliminate a huge problem of having a decline come through almost immediately from a carrier. The next is the personal health interview. Now, there are two types of personal health interviews being done right now. Up to age 64 with most carriers, it's by telephone. Age 65 and over, it's a face-to-face. Now, therein lies the problem. Because of COVID-19, the stay-at-home orders that states have implemented have caused delays here. It is becoming increasingly difficult to find a field nurse that will go out and do face-to-face interviews. So with COVID-19, obtaining the face-to-face has caused a delay. As states reopen, and some states are already starting to do this, this issue is starting to be lessened. But right now, if the carrier is unable to get a field nurse to go out to do the face-to-face interview, the applications are being held until such time as a face-to-face can be completed. Currently, the carriers are still accepting all applications. We're not denying any applications. If you want to submit an application, feel free to submit. They will hold them until such time as a face-to-face can be done. Now, the reason we're saying still submit is twofold. One, the application is now in the queue and you're in line to have a face-to-face done, and they will attempt to get a field nurse to do it. It also saves age. If they're about to turn 66, 67, whatever, and you get the app in before their birthday, we're saving the age. Now, the carriers don't like us to mention this to you, but we want to make sure you are as best informed as possible that the carriers are saving the age, and they will save it if you submit an application now. It does lock in the age. So that's very useful. Even in the time of coronavirus here, submitting an app to save age is still a thing that can get them lower premiums. So do it if you have a client that really wants long-term care insurance but is worried about premiums going up from an age increase, get the app in. One more thing here to note about the phone health interview. If the client is hearing impaired, we're not doing cognitive assessment yet here. If the client is hearing impaired, they can also request a face-to-face interview instead of a phone interview. So if they're under 65, they can still request the face-to-face. Again, this could cause the issue of a delay, but it is something that they can request if they're hearing impaired. Likewise, if language is an issue, such as maybe English is not their first language, please note that on the application or in that producer cover letter so that the personal health interview can be completed in their native language. The carriers do have access to field nurses that can speak different languages, so we can find one in the area that is able to conduct the interview or even the phone interview in the client's native language. Finally, that cognitive assessment. This is required for ages 60 plus. It's included in the telephone interview portion for 60 to 64. If it's over 65, then it's included in that face-to-face as well, and it's a little more in-depth. This is specifically to rule out any existing mental issues that may cause a decline of the case beforehand. It's required at ages 60 plus, but younger ages with a history of CVA, TIA, memory loss, or depression may also be required a cognitive assessment. That's at the underwriter's discretion. Now, if you don't know what those acronyms are that I just rambled off really quickly there, a CVA is a cerebrovascular accident, more commonly known as a stroke. A TIA is a transient ischemic attack, more commonly known as a mini stroke. So if they've had a stroke or mini stroke, they've experienced memory loss in the past, or any form of depression, the underwriter may come back and say, I would like to see a cognitive assessment. This next one is a requirement that usually doesn't factor in, but it has happened recently, so we thought we'd mention it. The client needs to have seen their doctor for a complete physical and had a CMP, or a complete metabolic panel, within the last 2 years, or in the past 24 months. If they haven't, the underwriter may require them to go visit their doctor at their own expense to have the physical and CMP done. This is usually a carrier-specific requirement, and it varies based on specific circumstances when this requirement isn't met before applying. There is one carrier that actually is taking this into account in the era of COVID-19, and that is Thrivent, one of our newer carriers that we've added. Thrivent, formerly known as the Lutheran Brotherhood or the AIDS Association for Lutherans, is allowing cases to go through up to age 70 without a face-to-face if they visited their doctor within the last 2 years and had a CMP. So if they can show that they've had a complete physical and had a complete metabolic profile done by their doctor within 2 years, we can skip the face-to-face up to age 70 with Thrivent. So there's an additional direction that you might be able to go if you're worried about the face-to-face not being able to be completed and a client really wants to get their hands on a long-term care insurance policy without having to wait. Thrivent may be a solution. The thing to know about Thrivent is it is a fraternal organization, so there is a question on the application regarding living a Christian life. It is the only time that question is asked. It does not come up in underwriting again, does not come up during claims. It does not come up during the life of policy ownership. It is only asked during the initial application process on the app, and that's the only time to satisfy their fraternal organization requirement. After that, it's a normal long-term care insurance policy. Preparing your client for the personal health interview. After you've applied, your next responsibility is to prepare the client for this interview. Think of it like an exam for school, and they're going to need to study for it. Now, this studying, though, is easy and open book. So it's very, very easy. It's more just kind of preparing the client for what questions are going to be asked of them. The carriers have put out brochures on how best to prepare for a PHI. Again, please contact our office at the end to receive a copy of the carrier's personal health interview brochure. The basic guidelines are going to be these, though. They have the client gather their doctor's names and the medications and dosages they are currently taking. These names will have already been placed on the application, so they should already have these things handy. But the PHI is designed to verify the information provided on that app. So this is kind of more of a double check. After they submit an app, sometimes the clients remember something that, oh wait, yes, there was another doctor that I saw and I forgot to put that on the app. If that happens and they mention another doctor's name in the phone health interview that was not on the app, be sure to let them know they need to tell you as well, because it will cause a delay. And the reason I say this is the carriers do not look at all the information until they have all the information. So they're not going to look at the phone health interview. The underwriter's not going to review the medical records until they've got both in their hands. And they aren't going to be ordering medical records from a doctor that was only mentioned in the personal health interview. They're only going to be ordering medical records based on what was on the app. And if a doctor pops up in the health interview that wasn't on the app, they're going to have to wait until they get that doctor's records as well. So if there has been a change, if they realize, oops, I forgot to put a doctor on the application, be sure that they tell you. Be sure to let them know that they need to advise you that there is an additional doctor that needs to be consulted or have their medical records researched and obtained. We recommend that you set aside 1 hour. We recommend that the client set aside 1 hour for this exam. This is just that seems to be the average time that it takes to complete a personal health interview is about 1 hour. The exam must also be done at their home. Now, phone health interview obviously could in theory be done anywhere. We highly recommend that be done in their home, even though it is by phone, mainly because it's a more calm atmosphere, less distractions. They really kind of need to concentrate during the interview process because the cognitive function test that's in there is going to ask some memory questions, and they should be prepared to answer those and be in a more suitable environment to do so. So taking a phone call in the middle of a grocery store or a shopping mall, not the best choice. So definitely make sure they try to do it in their home. Um, on the face-to-face interview, it must be done in the home. It cannot even be done in a workplace or any public space. That's not permitted. It must be done in the comfort of their home. In light of this pandemic, if your client is 65 or older, you might want to confirm with them that they are okay with that. A field nurse is going to have to come and visit them in their home to conduct the face-to-face interview. Now, there have been some slight exceptions to this. We had a case where the client would prefer to have met the field nurse in the front yard instead of inside the home, to kind of keep fresh air around and also, provide a little bit more social distancing. That was permitted in that one specific instance, but it is not common. Do not expect the field nurse to acquiesce to such a request. They are going to want to meet in a quieter place, such as living room, dining room, someplace inside the home. So be sure that the client is prepared for that and okay with that. Uh, Obviously, if you're taking an e-app, they didn't really want physical contact at that point. They may not want it at the face-to-face, but it is a required thing that needs to be done if they have to do a face-to-face. So they should be aware that that's one instance where they are still going to have to be in contact with someone. After the phone health interview is completed, the carrier is going to order the necessary medical evidence from the doctors listed on the app and mentioned during the phone health or face-to-face health interview. And that's where it's great for you. You don't have to order anything. All medical evidence that the underwriters require is going to be ordered by the carrier. You don't have to order the parameds, or excuse me, APS reports. You don't have to order anything. And better still, those parameds that I just flubbed on are not usually required and not ordered. They may be ordered at the underwriter's discretion, but let me put that into perspective for a second here. In the last 6 years, I have never had an underwriter order a paramed, not once. In every single case that I've touched in the last 6 years, I have not had a paramed come up. Now, they have ordered some additional records, like another APS from a specialist that they were unaware of until reviewing the initial records. Again, there's that delay that I was discussing. The specialist name was not mentioned anywhere on the app, but it was in the APS reports. So they had to go and order another set of APS reports, and it did cause a delay. So they have done that before. They've also occasionally asked for a test that may not have been completed according to the records. Like maybe they were diagnosed with something and the primary care physician suggested a test to follow up on that, or even said you need to go have a test done to make sure that this is fine, but that was not completed. That's going to throw up a huge red flag as well. So all diagnosed conditions or partially diagnosed conditions kind of need to be resolved within the records. If they're not, and by resolved, I don't mean cured, I mean just general status resolved. If they're not, the carrier is going to want to see why they weren't, and they're going to want to see the results after the fact. So that can cause some delays there as well. We've also had circumstances where the underwriter has come back and asked for more information before a case can even be underwritten at all, sometimes postponing the case entirely until a specific test is done. Uh, this has happened a couple times in the last couple of years. Usually the test is done at the proposed insured's own expense. They have to go to the doctor themselves, pay any copay that's required, get that scheduled, get the test results. Once they have those results, they should usually request a copy from the doctor because it's going to take a long time for the carrier to order those records. So they should obtain those records themselves. The doctor should be able to provide them to them and then submit that through the producer directly to the carrier. That way we can skip a whole process of having to actually go back through another APS report and waiting for that delay in getting the records assembled. If they submit it that way, we usually can get the thing overturned. If the test comes back the way that we want it to, the way that the client said, hey, this is not bugging me anymore, and the test shows that, perfect. We actually can totally reverse the postponement, and we have had the cases come back out of postpone and go back into issue. So that can help that situation when that happens. Usually the information that they need is obtained by them, though, without any requirements being placed on the producer. They usually will order the APS themselves. They don't need anything specific from the producer. They will handle it all internally. One thing to note here is that doctors' offices are extremely busy at present. They're dealing with a pandemic, so their operating procedures have changed. And in some cases, these doctors are only processing emergency patients at this time. Specific doctors are postponing routine appointments or elective surgeries or any number of appointments. If it's not life-threatening, they're not handling it right now. They're pushing it off until after the pandemic has passed. As a result, we've seen some delays start to creep in obtaining records. There are extenuating circumstances right now, obviously, that are causing these delays. So the process is getting a little bit longer than normal, but it still hasn't gone to the point where it's impossible to obtain these records. It's just a little bit longer. The normal turnaround time for records is 2 to 3 weeks. We're seeing 3 to 4 at this point in time. So as I said, not too much of a delay, but one is creeping in. A final word here on this is that many times doctors' offices are part of medical groups or they outsource their medical records to another firm. When this happens, it's not uncommon for the doctor's office itself to be unaware a request for records has been made. Also, carriers are now using a third-party copy service to obtain the records for them rather than actually calling themselves. For example, Mutual of Omaha uses a company called Release Point that handles all of their medical records copying. They're a copy service. They will deal directly with the doctor's office rather than the carrier doing it. The copy service does. So if your client is worried that something is taking too long and they call their doctor's office to get a status, hey, has Mutual of Omaha called and requested my records yet? They may be told that they haven't received a request for records because most likely they haven't. The doctor's office isn't the place where these copy services are going to get the records. If they know that the doctor is part of a medical group, they have a long list of a giant directory of where to go to obtain records from different medical groups across the country. They've been doing this for a long time. They've had experience as far as which direction they need to go to provide them with the best results. As a result, they're going to be calling that medical records service rather than the doctor's office, or they're going to be calling the records department of the medical group rather than the doctor's office. So the same people that the patient talks to or the client talks to at the doctor's office are not the same people that the medical records team is going to be talking to obtain the records. Completely different. So they may be told that their records have not been requested yet, when in fact, they probably are already being assembled by the copy service. So as a heads up, just to let you know, the client may come back and say, my records have not been ordered yet. What's the delay? They probably have, and that's just a heads up for you to let you know that it most likely is going through back channels rather than directly on the client side, but through the back office side of the medical groups. After all medical evidence is in, all the forms have been completed, a decision has come back from the underwriter, and the policy is about to be issued and mailed directly to you for delivery. At this point, we're collecting premium. This is good. Any premium shortage, if a carrier requested premium up front, or if it was Mutual of Omaha and didn't require any premium, this is where the premium is going to need to be collected, if applicable. If they selected a monthly EFT or electronic funds transfer, which is very common on the applications, it will automatically be drafted on the date specified on the application. Now, a word of caution here on this sometimes can occur very close to the policy issue date. If you specified a date on the application of, say, the 20th, and the policy went out to issue on the 14th, it's conceivable that you're going to be receiving the policy only a couple days before they actually draft the money out of the account. Or potentially, you could receive a policy the day after they draft from the account. Because if the policy is already in good working order, there's no additional requirements that need to be signed. They may draft the money while the policy is being mailed to you. So you should be aware of letting the client know that they may have to be prepared for a draft to occur before they get their final policy in their hands. This actually has happened in the last month where an e-app went through so fast, the producer wasn't aware that the policy actually went to issue on the very day before the draft was about to occur. So it caused some confusion. It was like, whoa, they just suddenly took a whole premium out, and it's because the policy already is in force. It was already completely good to go. There was the e-app sailed through underwriting, and it was all issued and done with no outstanding requirements on it except for premium. Once the carrier has all the underwriting requirements in, we usually see a decision within 48 to 72 hours. So that kind of gives you a clue also as to when that policy is going to be issued, as well as when a draft date conflict may occur. A delivery receipt is sometimes included, and possibly a statement of good health if the case has been in underwriting for a while. If medical records take a while to obtain, usually the rule of thumb is 60 days there. If we've actually had to go that long, like they had to order a second ABS, then a statement of good health may be required to say, hey, my health has not changed since I originally applied, nothing new has been diagnosed, and the client needs to affirm that with a signature on a form. And that gets submitted with the delivery receipt. There also may be other outstanding requirements on the app. These things that may have been turned into requirements to make it easier on you or the client. If, for example, a answer was missing on the app, they may, rather than require that form be submitted prior to issue, they may just say, we'll put this as a delivery requirement and leave it at that, and you have to have it returned to make the policy go in force. All these requirements can be sent either directly to the carrier or through our office. If you do send them through us, we will assist in tracking them for you to make sure that the carrier has attached them to the case and to complete the case as quickly as possible. Finally, commissions. After everything has been placed, the premium owed has been received, the carrier's is all done, the policy is in force. The carrier will then generate your commissions. Commissions are paid on an as earned basis. So if the modal factor is monthly, you'll earn your commissions monthly. If your modal factor is annual, you'll earn them on an annual basis. With carriers and through Heartland LTC, you have a vested contract, meaning you are not subcontracted underneath Heartland LTC. We do not own your production. We do not own your business. Your clients are yours. Your business is yours. You do not actually get anything else. You are not tied under Heartland LTC as far as your production trails go or your commission goes. That is paid directly from the carrier. So you will receive a direct deposit of your commissions to the account you specify from the carrier on the next commission cycle after the case's premiums are paid. So once a premium comes in, if it's whatever the draft date may be, the next time they run the commission cycle, that's when the actual commissions will be paid out to you on that. Usually the commission cycle is on a 2-week basis. It just depends. I think some carriers were paying weekly there for a little while, and some of them may still be, depending on if the threshold is met. So that's on a case-by-case basis there on that. The next is renewal trails. After your initial first year commissions, the trails begin, and they vary on out as we get older in the policies, but they do continue to pay out for the life of most insurance policies out there now. As long as the insured continues to pay premiums, you will continue to receive trailed commissions. Because you have a vested contract, though, these trails stay with you. So you will always receive the trails directly from the carrier as the client continues to pay their premiums. So what about the future? What happens after this pandemic is over? Well, first, let's talk a little bit about the carrier stability. As we've seen this pandemic spread, the carriers were quick to react and they made sure they were prepared. A lot of carriers took the action of changing things on the front side. Some carriers adjusted their underwriting requirements, while others modified product options that were available for sale. Most of the time, our big carriers, the traditional LTC guys, did not take the course of actually adjusting product option, but more of underwriting requirements up front in as a response to the COVID-19 outbreak. One thing remained the same though. The carriers have all remained financially stable. Their claims paying ability has not changed. Their ratings have been stable as far as their financial ratings go, and their long-term care planning remains unchanged. And we eventually expect them to return to pre-COVID-19 processes. During this time, we have seen Mutual of Omaha adjust their application process regarding certain patients that have contracted COVID-19 or come in contact with COVID-19. We've also seen them go to a more remote operating basis. They were actually able to, within, I believe, 48 hours, completely shift their case managers and most of their underwriting team to outside of the office to remote everything in so that they were able to work out of their houses, and it did not delay processing very much. The initial day of it was a little bit of a delay. Finally, e-applications, they have become more prevalent, but in actuality, the carriers already had e-application capabilities prior to this pandemic. Mutual of Omaha, NGL, Transamerica all had e-application systems online and in place on their websites. They have streamlined this process, but they were around before, and they will be around after. We have seen some agents question, like, are e-applications going to stay? Yes, they were here before, so they are going to stay. This has given some agents the ability to sell more than they would have otherwise been able to, because they are in remote locations or their client base is in remote locations, like that may be difficult to actually go out. It's a lot of travel time. So the e-applications provide a great remote selling opportunity for some of our agents that are in more remote locations or more rural locations. As we mentioned, some carriers have adjusted their underwriting requirements. We expect these new requirements to generally stay for a little while, possibly even after the pandemic has totally cleared. If you weren't aware of what these adjustments are, they're on the screen there right now. They're pretty much just a 30-day waiting period for anyone who has come into contact with a confirmed case of COVID-19. This includes medical professionals. So ER doctors, nurses, doctors that have actually diagnosed a COVID-19 case, they have to wait 30 days from their last date of contact. So if you're an ER doctor, that kind of means you're always in contact with COVID-19, or you're a hospital doctor that's treating these patients, you're always in constant contact. You're going to have to wait until you're no longer in daily contact with COVID-19 before you can submit an application. If you are one that has become infected with COVID-19, you have to wait 90 days until after you are cured or cleared of COVID-19. Once you have waited those 90 days, the application process returns back to normal. Submit an app, normal underwriting applies. There's nothing special. These waiting periods are from their last contact and the date that they were declared cured, respectively. So it's a rolling target, kind of like where we're at right now with the reopening target, the reopening guidelines of having 14 days of a downward trend in cases before states are supposed to consider opening. That was with the guidelines from the White House. Same general idea here. 30 days from the last point of contact or 90 days from when you were infected. The bond market is obviously in peril right now, basically, I guess is the way to describe it. It's at an all-time low. This combined with the interest rates being where they are has placed some strain on the carriers financially. We have not seen any evidence of financial instability, though. The ratings continue to remain the same with all of the carriers. There has not been any change in that. They have not changed their claims paying ability, nor have we seen any changes regarding any pricing updates other than the one with Lincoln MoneyGuard updating their prices on the front side. There have been no talk of in-force rate increases. There has been no talk of adjusting any of the rates on the traditional LTC carriers at this time. However, that still may be coming in the future if the markets do not recover fast enough, if the markets are not bounced back up where the carriers feel more comfortable in their financial situation, they may start considering adjusting some rates on the front end. Obviously, we're now over a month into this and they haven't taken that step, so this is less likely, but it's still a possibility out there. So our advice is if you have prospects considering long-term care insurance, to encourage them to purchase sooner rather than later. Once this pandemic has passed, there is obviously a huge consumer awareness right now regarding healthcare. It's highlighted the need for more care coverage out there for a lot of people. Consumers are more aware, they're more concerned, they're more involved in their healthcare choices. So it has enhanced consumer awareness regarding healthcare, and that we think is going to provide a little bit more of a boost and potentially provide a sales path for you as producers to be able to go out and re-examine your book of business to find out, how everyone's doing, and just kind of touch base with your clients to see where they are and see whether or not their own care needs have been met. As a result, as we begin reopening America, we highly recommend that you reach out to your book of business, see if they have planned for their potential future need of long-term care. Right now, COVID-19 is a temporary situation. When you have it, you eventually are, cured of it for the most part. The fatality rate is extremely low on this, but it is highlighting the ongoing care that is needed to be provided to people, and that's where long-term care comes in. So we highly recommend this is the perfect time to get back out there, especially when we're reopening back up, to visit with clients once it's permitted, and to make sure that you actually can get your clients back involved in potentially purchasing a long-term care policy to cover their needs down the road. So with it, that's going to do it for today's webinar and indeed the LTC 101 series. This was our final episode. Today we looked at the different steps in submitting an application from contracting to commissions. We also took a look at the future of LTC. We looked at how COVID-19 has adjusted some of this process in the short term right now. We hope you've enjoyed this series of webinar, and we hope we've given you some fresh ideas to boost your LTC business. Whether you're just getting started or a seasoned pro, Heartland LTC is here to help you with your LTC sales and help you move into the future as far as building an LTC business if you don't already have one going, or boosting one that you already may have that can help you get out there and get LTC to your clients. If you have any questions about today's webinar or about working with us here at Heartland LTC, I am opening up the lines. If you have any questions, feel free to type, or you can type in the chat box. I do have one here. does Heartland provide leads or have a lead program of any kind? We did do a lead program a couple years ago. Unfortunately, it did not work as well as we had hoped. The company that we worked with, the leads were less than stellar, let's just say. So we abandoned the lead program at that point in time because we did not want to actually provide bogus leads out there that were just causing, no sales to occur. Basically, the leads that they were generating was not good. We are looking into possibly getting back into that, although right now we do not have a leads program at this time. Any other questions? My email address, I'm going to put it up on the screen right now for you so you have it. There is my email address for you. It's john@heartlandltc.com, and it's John with no H. That's also my phone number there as well. That comes directly to me. So if you have any questions and would like to talk with me directly, just give me a call. I am available anytime. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any questions coming through chat and not hearing any, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up then. I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. Again, if you do have further questions about today's topic or questions or comments in general, or perhaps maybe even a specific client situation that you'd like to discuss, feel free to contact me after today's webinar at the phone number and email that you see on the screen here. If you'd like any materials that we discussed today, like the fact finders, the phone health interview brochures, the field underwriting guides from the carriers, please drop me an email. I'll be happy to email any of those out to you. Coming in May, coming next month, we are going to be hosting a webinar with National Guardian Life regarding their essential LTC product and specifically their worksite program. So if you're looking to get into group long-term care sales, including very small groups, like very small businesses, I'm talking very small. And normally when somebody says very small in worksite, they're talking 100. I'm talking single digits possibly. LTC, essential LTC with NGL offers very small group plans. So if you're interested in that, in potentially selling to small businesses and covering long-term care needs as an employee benefit, you do not want to miss this webinar. Look for an announcement later on this week regarding the date and time of that. We'll be blasting that out. We are going to invite you guys first. So as attendees of the LTC 101 seminars, you will have first dibs on reserving your space in the NGL webinar. Again, thanks for attending. I hope you all have a great day. Hope you're staying safe out there, and we will see you next time.